This is the Tapped In Podcast, the podcast for beverage distributors that want to empower their sales team to drive business results. Welcome back to the Tapped In Podcast, sales and strategy for beer distributors. I'm your host, Bud. Mikey, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Things are good.
Good. You're coming off the weekend of a trip for an on-site. I'm coming off a week of Disney. We had different work week experiences. Did you have any good food? Anything that was fun from last week?
No, actually, so I was working in my home state here in Michigan, so I didn't stay overnight. So I traveled back and forth, and I slipped into the sales rep routine, right, where you just skip lunch and you bust out your day. So yeah, we didn't eat, but I had a quick reminder of what Michigan spring, summer, and fall is, and that's basically just road construction. So an hour and a half of driving and nothing but construction.
The state flower is out. The cones are out and doing their thing.
Cones are out in full force. Yeah, absolutely. It was terrible.
Love it. Well, I come back to Michigan on Saturday, so we'll be driving through it in the evening on Saturday. At Disney, for me, it was like beer. I mean, we went to Magic Kingdom first, so that was not a big deal. But every single time I turned around, like you could find a beer. My brother-in-law had a beer in his hand, and when we lost him, our nieces were like, "Mommy, he's getting a beer. We know where he is."
Love it. That's great.
It was a good time. It was a good time, but that is, one of the things that the industry is dealing with as a whole is like this, and we won't talk about this today, but we should talk about it. We'll put it in our cap, talk about it later at some point. It's like the expansion of availability of alcohol across, which is something that beer distributors deal with around drop sizes and profitability for delivery and all that good stuff. So,
absolutely.
But today we wanted to get into our talk, which is all about sales meetings. So we had a client ask us, "Hey, what do we do from here? How do our sales meetings start to work? And what might I do differently at my sales meetings?" And that was a good topic to kind of discuss. And I'll kind of get started with, there's a lot of different things that you need to get done at the sales meetings, and how you do them is probably more important than what you do, in my position. So, we got this list of stuff we got to do, how you engage with the team and how you drive the meetings. And I always go back to like our first sales meetings when I first came back into our wholesaler, and they were like 2-hour long meetings, and they had no real agenda necessarily, other than just dissertation and word diarrhea on all this stuff. And I remember I was like, I'm going to go on a mission to make them like less than an hour, or at least get them down to an hour. And I did some very chaotic things to keep the conversation going, would be the way that I would put it.
The talking stick at one time.
Well, the talking stick only got us down to like an hour and 15. My last step, I was like, if we don't get underneath an hour, I'm gonna make everybody stand, and if they want to talk, they're gonna need to hold a medicine ball, a 10-pound medicine ball over their head for everything they want to say. That doesn't necessarily inspire conversation, but it does meet the goal of speed.
Yeah. And I feel like back in that time, you were basically coming up with things to talk about. I mean, you kind of had to just come up with things to talk about to fill the meeting, and then it just kind of spiraled out of control. There was no structure, and if you felt like if you didn't have something to talk about, you weren't doing any good, which is the total opposite of where we're trying to go.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. How and why rather than just what. So let's talk about, how do you see, Mike, if you're stuck in a rut, or if you're wondering how to kind of reorganize or re-engineer your sales meetings, what do you see top performing sales meetings looking at? If the underperforming or maybe less than ideal sales meeting is kind of meandering around into no agenda or a loose agenda, What do you see like the top performing reps or top performing sales leaders doing?
Creating engagement, I think that's probably the most important, right? Sales meetings are not one-sided presentations, they're collaborative sessions. We want to make sure we're driving engagement. Of course, we have our agenda, what we want to get through, but on the opposite side too, I mean, if a lot of that can be handled through email, and we're not just standing up in front of the team regurgitating an email that we've already sent or something that we've already, talked to them about in person. If we're using our time wisely, keeping them short, keeping them sweet, to the point, what we want to get through, and sharing best practices. I mean, we'll dive into all that, but yeah, I think the most important is definitely driving engagement and what matters to the business, right? What is our ultimate goal? Sharing in that ultimate goal. If our ultimate goal is to become more profitable, and that's what we need to be talking about. If our ultimate goal is to the health of the business overall, I mean, that's where we really need to drive our agendas, and create some engagement. What's working? What are you doing out there? And get some back and forth going.
Yeah, I love where it's like it's not one sided. There's the collaboration back and forth. Sales leaders, we don't spend as much time in the trade as sales reps do, and when we share, stuff we're looking at from data analysis or running reports or things that our supplier partners want to bring up, there needs to be some collaboration back and forth. Always felt like our crew, you and Tom did a really good job of presenting stuff from an inquisitive tone, where it was, here's what we're going to share. We want to hear your thoughts about it, and always being an inquisitive rather than a lectern or a dissertation, or they're, lecturing to the crew. I think that's different. It's different with the size and scale we are. Do you see anybody having concerns or problems with doing it at scale with 50, 60 reps?
I mean, no, I feel like that would almost be an advantage. Now you're having more ideas to share, right? Different best practices. And in an operation of that size, you're going to have a lot of different markets, mini markets within your whole market, rural, urban, different accounts. So yeah, I feel like in that setting, it'd almost be better to create the engagement. You're going to get more feedback on some different examples as well.
For sure, for sure. We loved doing the questions, getting drive engagement. We wanted to hear what reps did. So how do we do this? So how do you create engagement? One of my favorite ways to do it is that you're trying to take the things that you see from the trade and you're actually asking reps about it. Like, what are you doing in this store? Or what did you do in this store? Or I saw you do this. Can you tell the group more about it? There's an element of people like to share what they're working on. There's a human behavior side of that where we like to talk about what we've been doing. And if we're inviting the team to do that, when they're sharing that, whatever they worked on, it could be placing 19.2s of New Belgium, it could be building a display of a non alcoholic product, it could be changing something that has changed the outcomes in the market. I think of another story that I heard from a rep where, hey, I placed this non-alcoholic package. I don't remember what it was so crazy, like juices or whatnot. And I placed it here and I moved the display and it wasn't doing really good, but I moved the display to a different part of the store and then it started really moving. So getting a rep to share that story from their vantage point allows the other reps and the rest of the team to hear those success stories and see where it's actually working in other markets, and then they can start to apply it. So that's one way that I see to like drive engagement is you actually got to get the team involved. You got to ask questions and push the needle on people.
Absolutely, yeah. You can do it a couple different ways. Just like you said, if you're out in the market and you see something that a rep did that was a little different, maybe thinking outside of the box, or you're just seeing some good results by asking them what they did, sharing what they did. You can also use the data. We can, when we're running our reports and we've noticed an account really turning around with a specific product or even overall, call them out in the sales meeting. What did you do? What have you been doing? Most likely there's a great story that's going to go along with it that he's going to share that the rest of the team may not have thought of, might spark something in their mind. If we stand up there and just preach, do this, do this, do this, do this, it hits a little bit different when one of your peers is like, hey, I went out and I did this, and these are the results. something you may not have thought about. I mean, and usually it's always thinking outside the box, right? I mean, that's primarily what we're really trying to get
Yeah.
our whole team to do and our reps to do is think outside of the box. What else can we do to grab some incremental dollars or volume?
Finding the experiments that one rep is running or trying that one rep is testing and seeing that they work, and then applying that to other reps on the fly and scaling it, really, taking it from 2 or 3 accounts to 6, 12, 15, 18. The other way you can do it too is specifically if you have a big team, is to rely on your team leads and ASMs to tee up the conversations. So if you've got 50 or 60 reps, that might not be something that you as a central sales leader would drive the central conversation, but you can tee up the sales leadership. So the ASMs and the team leaders would be like, hey, we're going to be asking questions this week about these topics. These are things that we need to have people ready. So when I'm looking for people, you guys need to engineer the conversation to the people that are on your team that have stories and are ready to talk about. I don't think there's anything wrong with setting somebody up for success and reminding them, like, we will be quizzing people on this on Friday or on Monday morning or whenever you do your sales meeting. Like, we will be talking about this. Be prepared to be pumped.
Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
that gives people a lot of
And
power.
focus too. You're not going to lose their focus because if they know they need to talk at some point, I mean, their head is in the game the whole time too. You're not drifting off in the la la land and missing some important information.
Yeah, I had better be ready to go to speak, or better be ready to go to listen so I can expand on. And ultimately, when we have people ask us about this is about generating new habits and driving, new thinking and kind of ingraining that. So there's a lot of different philosophies and research out there around how do you generate a new habit, or how do you drive a new habit. Anywhere between 30 days to 90 days is kind of like the general research. For me, it's a philosophy. I always thought about it as a culture and a religion at Atlas, the way that we chose to partake in it. So it became sharing the success stories, it became asking the inquisitive side. But we also did one more thing too, Mikey, and you really kind of drove this. We shared the data and the information that we were inspecting, so the reps could actually see the way that we were looking at it and the team could understand the way that we were looking at it, and that helped them continue to learn how to use GP per CE, how to use points of distribution, and understand how all of these different things that we were looking at from an analytics side, so they could leverage it in. So talk us through a little bit about what you were always trying to do from an analytics side and using data, turning it into stories, and generating the collaboration that we're talking about.
Yeah. And it comes back to right, keeping our focus at our sales meetings, and if we're trying to drive a certain point, we want to use the correct data, right? So whether it be IRI data, trends within our business, trends outside of just our business and our market, things like that, to open up. I mean, what we did is basically opened up our book to show our reps, like, hey, this is our logic behind it, this is what we're thinking, we're bringing in this new product, and this is why. Here's the IRI data behind it. Here is, what's going on in some other markets. And most importantly, it's profitable. Every time we launched a new product, we always shared what the GP per CE is so that they were exposed to that. They knew what kind of weight it was pulling. Um, and they wanted it to not only just get in, but they wanted it to turn as well so that they can continue to earn those dollars. But yeah, exposing them to basically what the thought process was behind it. If we're bringing something in, we're not bringing it in just because we know it's going to work. We think it's going to work. These are the reasons that we believe in it. Share that, and the profitability side of it as well too, especially NA game. I remember when we got back into that, we got burned with Monster. Then we did a really good job with Celsius, and Celsius was doing great, and then that got taken away. And then Ghost came out, and at that point, most of the team was like, "I'm pretty spent on NA, and if we
Yeah.
don't have spend behind it, we don't have the dollars to get this in. How am I going to make this work?" And exposing them to what that GP per CE was on that product, knowing that it was all incremental, and going out there and grabbing the space anywhere they can, and then using sharing our success stories when you did get it in. Maybe you got a couple flavors on the bottom and it worked, and you expanded it and you moved it up by sharing that. But yeah, the thought process of why we wanted to bring Ghost in, it wasn't, just to say we have an NA. It was we believed in it. This is why. Here's some data behind it, and this is where we're going with it.
Yeah. It comes back to telling a story. How do we, it's one thing to show an eye chart. And for those of us who know what those are, and those of us who don't, it's you go to the doctor and you're looking at getting your eye examined and all these little tiny, writings and everything. We have a habit of doing that as sales leaders across industries. And they're putting up big data charts with all these different numbers, like in Excel and whatnot, and it's an eye chart. You got to have good eyesight to kind of read it. And if we're talking about this through a sales meeting, it's like we have to have a story around why we're showing this information. What
Yeah.
is the information that we want to get out of this? How are we going to actually collaborate with the team around what we're showing? I've got no problem with showing an eye chart if we have a way to kind of dissect it, drive through it, and actually get the understanding of why we want to focus on this or why we're looking at this information. Because we're looking at things like volume, profitability, and gap to target on pods, and why are the pods doing what they're doing, and are you lapping your 13-week pod report, and do you have things sitting in the back room still, or do you have things on the shelf that haven't been moving? These are all things that like the data doesn't show. It's only a part of the story, and that's why the collaboration has to happen. I always remember one of the objectives that we had was around, or one of our supplier partners had, was around a 13-week multi-package pod program for an RTD. And I was like, we're never going to be in first place. I remember telling our DM, we're never going to be in first place. We're probably never going to be in last either. And you could see everybody else kind of rotate around where we were kind of in the middle. And it was, you could literally see people like, oh, hey, well, let's just go place a bunch of new pods, or let's go, resell those items in. And then 13 weeks could go by and then they'd cycle back down to the bottom. And we just chose to kind of say, like, hey, our market is what our market is. We're going to be in this little zone of, having whatever number it was like 10 different stores rather than the goal of like 14 or 15 or 20. And we're just going to kind of be circling around, trying to actually genuinely place a product and have it rotate and move out and go into consumers' mouths, tummies. And there's like this challenge with us in the industry where we always want to be at the top competitively, which I get that. You also need to rationalize, why are you doing that to be at the top? Like, is it driving bottom line performance, or is it doing, Steve Jessup, one of our outside accountants, always taught me, through creating activity for activity's sake, are we
Yeah.
driving bottom line performance? You know, and when you tell these stories, when you're putting this sales presentations together, we want to tell the stories through the context of how we're driving bottom line performance for the team and for the organization. And if we do that well, the reps will get this stuff. Like, they'll understand this stuff inherently, and many of them will actually start to understand all of it or pieces of it even better than we do across their territories, and apply it better and smarter across their territories as well, for sure.
Yeah. Pushing packages just to be on top of the list isn't going to do any good for the business if that package doesn't work in the account.
Yeah.
We're getting a package in the account just to check a box, just to be on top of the list. It's really, I mean, it was a great example this week when I was on site, and 12-pack bottles for Bush Light, right? It was a decent, it wasn't lighting the world on fire, but it was a decent Bush Light account. Needed the pod count, and the 12-pack bottle was a priority for distribution. While we were in the account, he picked up a whole case of 12-pack bottles because they were outdated, and reordered that case. And then I asked him why. Why are we reordering this package? Because he had already mentioned that not only this time did it go out of date, it has a problem. It doesn't move. He typically picks it up. And I said, well, why are you reordering it? He said, well, I need to have this package in here. It's a priority package. Well, if we're just picking it up every 90 days, 110 days, what are we doing? We're creating activity for activity's sake, right? We're getting on top of that list, but ultimately, the company, the business is hurting because
Yeah.
we're not making any money. So we dug into the data at that account. Bush Light was only selling in cans, which typically it does, right? I mean, it's a can product. And 30s were doing pretty good. So to expand on that, to use that space, he cut the 12 pack bottle right off the order, looked into 18 cans. 18 cans obviously have a little bit more profitability behind them. He took next to the 30, slid that 18 in there, hoping to grab some of that 30 pack consumer, make a little bit more money because if you're buying 30 cans at a time, you might be buying two 18 packs. Company is gonna make out. But we also added another SKU, stayed within the brand family, but hopefully something that's going to turn a little bit more and not just send it in for activity's sake.
Yeah. Nudge people out of the rut, move in a different direction. Here's a good question. We've personally done the Friday AM sales meeting. We've done the Monday AM sales meeting. We've played around with the afternoon weekday intro or middle of the week meetings. Where do you think the best, or maybe let's start this. Where do you think the worst time to have a sales meeting
Monday morning.
is? Tell me
uh,
more why. That was one of my ideas that I tried to push in philosophy behind us. So tell me why you thought that was the worst.
I liked it. I liked it from the philosophy side of it because let's face it, if we're meeting on Friday and we're sharing some data, we're sharing some success stories, maybe we're sharing some priorities. We run the half of our Friday, we get home, we enjoy our weekend to the fullest. We come back Monday, we forgot 80 to
What
90%
did we
of it.
talk about on Friday?
Yeah. What did we talk about on Friday? And it's just, I mean, you're rolling out of the week by sharing the priorities and how we want to start our week. When you suggested going to Monday morning, I thought it was a great idea. Hey, let's start fresh. We're gonna, talk about things. It'll be fresh in your mind for the whole week. But what we lost was engagement. We lost. You're coming in. You have the weekend still hanging in your head. Let's face it, Monday mornings are tough for everybody. Getting the engagement, getting the people just to stay focused was a little tough.
The big idea that I had around Mondays is it would like force us into doing like half an hour to 45-minute sales meetings because everybody's in a rush to get out of
Yeah, yeah, everybody wanted to get going.
it. Yeah. But you're right. So pro Monday can be fast, sweet, and focused, and you got people lined up for the week. Con is you lose the collaboration and really kind of fostering the back and forth. What do you think about like a midweek meeting?
I love midweek meetings.
Yeah.
You have some things fresh in your head from the week that you've already done, right? If we're sharing in new things, we still have a half a week to roll through it. Yeah, I think midweek meetings are great.
Yeah. There's a great book if anybody wants to read it. It's called Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni. The book comes up in my head right now talking about this because one of the topics that the book talks about is like there's specific reasons why we have certain types of, and one of the things that you can take into practice from the book is if you did want to take and like, hey, maybe I want to do have like a focus around a direction or a plan for the week, you could do what's called a stand up. So every meeting needs to have a reason and a design that are different from each other. Because a strategy meeting where you're trying to think creatively or outside of the box or do brainstorming requires a different segment of energy, a different part of the brain than something that's like a stand up, which is 15-20 minutes, share about what needs to get done, more of like a think of in a kitchen. We're trying to expedite and get food out of the kitchen. Like we don't think a lot about what we're making if you're running in the kitchen. You're just like cooking what's on the menu and getting food out of the plate. That's more on the plate and out the door. That's what a stand-up is. So if you really wanted to have something or break it into a couple different pieces, you could choose to do something more on a cadence that was 15 to 20 minutes that was a stand up early in the week, in the morning, probably around these are the objectives for the week. These are the things we're seeing. These are the things that we want to work on. Not a lot of collaboration, designed in there, not designed to not be collaborative either, designed to be much more lecture and dissertation driven to the team to consume information. Then you could lap back around later in the week in the afternoons probably, and where you get a little bit more time where people aren't trying to rush off. Morning meetings are in beer too are always like, I just want to get to my first stop, bro.
Yep.
Like I just want to move in my first stop and keep moving, right? And I got a lot of stuff. Maybe I got kid events, or I got, golf to play in the summertime, or bowling in the wintertime, or I got after work activities. Like I just want to get through. So if you want to foster that strategy or that collaboration, potentially doing it in the afternoon, or if you're on a 4-day selling week where you're not selling on Friday, that opens up a lot of opportunities to do stuff Friday mid morning or in the morning where there's not a lot of pressure for the rest of the day. So those are ideas that I bring to mind. Not anything that I've seen specific in practice, but this is what we're here to talk about in this podcast. We're here to talk about ideas and ways that we could get better as sales leaders and CEOs of these beer distributors. So, Mikey, anything else on the topic?
Frequency. What's your thought
Yeah.
on frequency? I mean, because it's been engraved in our head that we have to have the weekly sales meeting, even if we don't have anything to cover.
Well,
Are we
part of the
wasting our time
assessment
doing it?
process.
What's that? I'm sorry.
It's part of the assessment process for a lot of our big suppliers where you have to hold weekly meetings too.
Correct, yeah. But as far as sit down total collaboration, I mean, like you just said, meeting once a week to discuss what you want to discuss real quick, more of a presentation style. And then one big, maybe monthly collaboration meeting. How do you feel about that? Maybe even sitting around a happy hour and getting some of that engagement, sharing in some of the success stories and what's working and what's not.
I mean, our team kind of went to war against meetings in a private way. Tommy kind of waged a private war against meetings. We chose to take a lot of the attitude is that don't let an email get in the way of me. Don't let a meeting get in the way of sending an email or something like that.
Absolutely.
So this is something that as a sales leader, I would encourage you to kind of play with. So there's a lot more things that you can get done in an email or in a group chat, or if you're using Slack or Teams in one way, shape, or form, or to kind of share data and information that you want people to focus on. There's a lot of tools out there. We use this product called Loom with clients all the time. We're actually taking videos, sharing our screen, and it's not even long form. It's usually a minute to a minute and a half, and you can send these video links right out to your sales team to talk about to actually show what you're thinking about or what you're working on or what you want them to understand. So play with my first piece of advice or duration is try to play with what can I get out or across without actually having to be in the room together. Then you've got to start to pick through what do I actually want people to be in the room for. And that duration, the mind can only take what the ass can endure. So if it is dissertation style, no collaboration needed, stand up, 20 minutes, no matter how big the team is. If you're just up there to share objectives for the week, talking about closing gaps, looking at, goals versus actuals, want to do a quick summary on any of those things, that could be 15, 20 minutes in a morning and hustle on to your day. If you want to make it more collaborative, and what really these are the sales meetings that I love to participate in, Mikey, the ones I love to lead, the ones that you love to lead and participate in, that needs to be at least 45 minutes to an hour, really. And nobody complains about those
Right.
because they're no, even though they're longer, and by design they're long, and it's because they are engaged if they're done well. And if you're sampling product, or if you're talking about, or if you're at a retail account sampling product like a happy hour or anything like that, Very rarely do people complain about that because it's collaboration. They're involved in the process. They're not just sitting there listening to us as sales leaders drone on. They're learning something. They're hearing from their peers. They're talking. That's kind of my zone, and also, that's what the book talks about. The Patrick Lencioni book talks about too, that the brain isn't prepared to shift gears from tactics and strategy. So if you know that it's gonna be strategy and it's gonna be more collaboration, and this is kind of the realm of what the meeting looks like, you are better prepared to meet the expectations as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. We use that meeting you're talking about too, the maybe the one once a month, a little bit longer collaborative meeting for suppliers as well. If we were
Yeah.
launching a new product, one of our big things, if we're launching a new product, I want the supplier to come in and tell their story too. We can get the team engaged, reasons to believe, hear their story. They're gonna like that. They're gonna buy into that a little bit more. So yeah, I mean, and not a whole 1 hour thing. It's just, hey, stand up, give us 15 minutes of your time. Let's talk about the product, let's talk about the company, and get some of that buy-in.
That was my next question for you, Mikey, is like, what do you do with suppliers, guardrails, rules of the road, all that good stuff?
Yeah. The last thing I want is a supplier standing up in front of my team for an hour going over data that's not relevant to them, that they're going to lose interest in. But like I just said, I mean, new product launches, especially new supplier launches, new supplier, it's critical to get them up in front of the team, even if it's via Zoom, something, just tell the story about the company, what's going on with this product, everything else like that. And even some of our key suppliers, we had a handful of key suppliers that we would want to on a yearly basis just kind of, hey, give us an update, right? What's new this year? Where are we going with it? When you hear that straight from the supplier, it resonates a little bit differently than us as leaders standing up there regurgitating what we heard in a meeting or read in an email or whatnot. So yeah, using suppliers for meetings and is great.
It has to be value add, and ways that we can make suppliers be more successful through value add is like giving them rules of the road. You are carefully crafting the design of your meetings and how you want them to work and how you're having your sales meetings interact. Do not be fearful to just tell the suppliers, like, this is the best way to interact with the team. This is the and this is the expectation that I have in how you interact with the team. Like, don't let a supplier come into your sales meeting and run the sales meeting the way that they want it run. Run it the way, get them to run it the way that you expect it to be run. I don't think
Absolutely.
there's anything wrong with briefing what they're going to share. I don't think there's anything wrong with telling them that you want to see the deck beforehand, telling them the time limits they have, having them hold to the time limit, telling them what is going to get the most success out of them. I don't think there's anything wrong with any of that at all, and giving them rules of the road of how to be successful. I mean, ultimately, they're sitting in front of the people that they're trying to get attention to. Anybody who pushes back on that doesn't understand what they're there to do. Like, they're there to garner attention and to get the team rallied around whatever they're sharing. If they're giving you pushback because they don't like the rules of the road for them, that should be the question of like, do you not understand what you're trying to do here? Is if I'm trying to rally troops and if I'm not communicating to the troops the way they're expecting or excited or used to, then don't even come. You're going to cause more distraction, more pain, and the people will be disengaged from the brand than if they will be like fall in love with you, like what you share, process what you're sharing faster, and understand what you're trying to get at. Some suppliers do it really well, but naturally, and some people really struggle with it, and we can have more control as sales leaders at these distributors to make sure that the suppliers can be successful. We should take it as a badge of, I want you to be successful, rather than kind of a call out of, I'm going to be a big brother and tell you to do your job. No, I want you to be successful for my team. I want you to be successful on how my team is going to listen to you and engage with you. And if I help you be more successful, then they will be, and then the company will be as well.
Yeah, you want them to like them as a company and as a person,
Yeah.
the face of the companies. It goes back to always saying, our bartenders are our frontline salespeople, whether we like it or not. They are frontline salespeople. They're selling our products sometimes more actively than we are. And if we befriend a bartender, that bartender likes us, all of a sudden they like our products as well, right? They're a little bit more prone to suggest something that's in our portfolio. Somebody asks for an IPA, they're, oh yeah, try this one. Have you had this one? That goes back to suppliers too. I watched it firsthand. Suppliers that we had a good relationship with that would come in, have fun launches, meetings, create some hype around it, some engagement versus coming in and just doing a straight up presentation going over numbers.
Yep. Yep. But well, good topic today, Mikey. I think that kind of does it for the week on this episode. Thanks for joining us today on this episode of Tapped In Podcast. We will be back with more for as long as you're listening, or until we get tired of talking to you. So cheers. Thanks, Mikey.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks.